Well, hello everyone. This is our first session of our class, Freedom in American Society, and I'm looking forward to working with you all over the next several weeks. Most of you probably know that PBA was founded in 1968, but many of you may not know that at that time, the trustees of the university wrote into the bylaws of our institution the requirement that every student who graduates from PBA must take this Freedom in American Society course. So I know maybe I'm being hopeful, maybe some of you are taking the course out of interest, but I suspect that the vast majority of you are taking it because it is required for all PBA graduates. And my question is this: when you were signing up for this course, did any of you ask yourselves, why are they making me do this? Why do I have to take this course? I mean, you know, maybe your major is biology or graphic design or forensics or whatever, and you'd rather be studying in your specialized area, and yet you have to take this course. Maybe you even felt it was intrusive, or you feel resentful, and it may be a waste of time. I hope to convince you by the end of our course that that is far from true. In fact, the very opposite is true, and you may not believe me now, but I'm going to suggest this may be the most important course that you take throughout your academic career. So let's begin. The course is Freedom in American Society. As you'll see as we go throughout the course, the first thing we have to do in every instance is define the terms that we're using. We're living in a kind of Humpty Dumpty postmodern world where words have come to mean whatever people want them to mean. Well, that's a recipe for confusion, if not outright disaster. Confucius, the ancient sage Confucius, warned us thousands of years ago. He said, when words lose their meaning, people lose their freedom. And so we are going to very carefully define every term that we use in this course, some of the great terms of our moral and political heritage, such as freedom, justice, law, rights, democracy, toleration, and many others. Because we're living in a time where those words have been transformed almost into their opposites and are used in such a variety of bewildering senses. So the first thing we want to do is identify what the great architects of the American tradition meant when they said, give me liberty or give me death, or live free or die. We're going to use freedom and liberty, by the way, are interchangeable terms throughout this course. Freedom comes from the Germanic word Freiheit, and liberty comes from the Latin word liber, meaning free. So we want to be careful. What is freedom? When the framers and founders of America used that term, they had a very clear experience in mind. They were not living in a postmodern world where words mean whatever we want them to mean. They were referring to a very clear experience, as I said, one that I'm almost certain every one of you will be able to relate to once we understand what it means. Freedom has had many different meanings throughout history and in various different cultures. But the meaning of freedom as used in our tradition, while we celebrate the Statue of Liberty, the Liberty Bell, the sweet land of liberty, is probably best described by a concrete example. Let me give you an example. Try to imagine a scene where you're walking on a kind of deserted street. Say you're walking to your car, and suddenly as you're walking down the street, someone jumps out of the bushes and comes over, puts a gun at your head and says, give me your wallet or your purse, as the case may be. Okay, you have to react quickly, spontaneously. You look around, scan the environment to see if there's any help is on the horizon. You see nothing and you make a decision and you hand over your wallet or your purse. The question is this: is that an act of freedom on your behalf? Have you freely handed over your wallet or your purse? I think a moment's reflection will convince most of us that no, that really wasn't free. Well, why not? And you're correct. It is a classic example of a violation of freedom. Freedom means the ability to act in a truly voluntary manner, to act or think. And that requires the ability to act or think in the absence of what we call coercion, C-O-E-R-C-I-O-N. Coercion is just another word for force, threats, intimidation, pressure of one kind or another. And what has happened in the situation where the person is pointing a gun at your head and demanding your wallet? That person is, we shall call him the coercer. He is trying to coerce you, the victim, into doing what he wants rather than what you want to do. And he's doing it by using the means of coercion. Think about what has happened when he's put that gun to your head. Okay, you have to make a choice. Hand over the wallet or don't. You do have a choice there, right? But both of the choices that are open to you now because the gun is at your head are undesirable from your point of view. You don't want to hand over your wallet, but you also may not want to resist because you may face greater danger than merely losing your wallet, perhaps your life. You don't know what this person's going to do. So under those constraints, these two bad options, you have to choose the lesser of two evils. And so most people, most of the time, not always, will hand over the wallet rather than risk greater danger to themselves. The coercer, the gun wielder, by putting that gun to your head, he has deliberately narrowed your options to two undesirables from your point of view. Hand over the wallet, as he wants, or don't, and risk further harm. Under those circumstances, he is hoping that he can induce you to do what he wants, which is hand over the wallet. That's the reason he's doing this. You know, as we are individuals, and throughout the day, and we all have different values, purposes, goals, and so forth. And throughout the day, we're constantly encountering people that we want to do things for us, or do something that we want. As human beings, we are limited in the means that we have to get other people to do what we want. The way of a free man is the hard way. That is, to get other people to do what we want, we have to persuade them to do that. For example, in our example, the coercer could have come over to you and asked you, tried to persuade you to hand over your wallet. I mean, I don't know, maybe he says he's starving or his children are starving or whatever. He could have tried a million different ways to get you to hand the wallet over voluntarily. The problem with persuasion as a means to get other people to do what we want is that people have free will. And you can persuade all day long, you can talk till you're blue in the face, as the saying goes, and the other person may just say, no, I don't really want to hand over my wallet. So unless you're willing to live with that voluntary decision, the only other means that are open to people to get others to do what they want is to use the far less noble means of coercion, to try to force them to do what you want. And that's exactly what the guy with the gun is doing. He wants your wallet, which he's entitled to do. He can want your wallet, nothing wrong with that. But he's not using persuasion, he is using the coercive means to get it. And there is something wrong with that, in our opinion, in the opinion of the American tradition. So freedom means the ability to act or think in the absence of coercion. That's the formal definition that we will be using as we go throughout this course. And it happens to be the definition and understanding of freedom embraced by the founders of our tradition. Again, when they said, give me liberty or give me death, what they were saying is, allow me to walk around this world pursuing my values, my goals, my purposes that I have chosen of my own free will, and not to be forced to submit to the arbitrary will of another person who manages to so constrain my circumstances that I am induced to do what the coercer wants rather than what I want to do. And I think every one of you can relate this experience to this understanding of freedom to your own experience. We all know the difference when we are doing something of our own free will voluntarily, or when we feel intimidated, threatened, forced, pressured to do something. And what the free society looks like, that we're going to be exploring throughout this semester, is a society, as I said, where most people, most of the time, can walk around the world pursuing their own choices, their own values, their own purposes, and they're not forced to submit to the arbitrary will of another person or persons. That's what freedom means. And as we shall see, the free society is not a state of perfect freedom. Perfect freedom would mean that we would have to completely eradicate the use of coercion as a means to get people to do what we want. We would have to totally eliminate that. As we shall see, first of all, is that possible? Is that even possible that we could stop every attempt of one person to coerce another? We're going to see that the answer there is no. That would fundamentally transform human nature, which we don't think is on the horizon. Is it desirable? Would we want to eliminate all coercion, even if we could? Again, I'm going to show you that even though we tend to have a negative view of coercion, we look at it with suspicion because we are heirs of the tradition of freedom. Coercion is really best understood as a neutral tool. It can be used for bad purposes, forcing someone to hand over their wallet, or it can be used for good or moral purposes, and I'll show you some examples of that. But in itself, it's neutral. It's just because the means that we have to get other people to do what we want are so limited, persuasion or coercion. Coercion is everywhere in life. We've all encountered it. We all encounter it, sometimes on a daily basis, and maybe some of you have exercised it in order to get what you want. It's as common as rain. Let me give you some examples. All right, let's see. Well, let's start right here at the Palm Beach Atlantic University. As I mentioned at the outset, I know that most of you are taking this course because you're required to do so. PBA has a rule that every student has to take this course to graduate. Maybe some of you didn't want to take this course, but yet you have to. So here's the question. Is PBA violating your freedom by forcing you to take this Freedom in American Society class? That's pretty bad. That makes it difficult for me as an instructor. Are they? Actually, fortunately, they're not. And let me explain why. The only way PBA could force you to take this class against your will is if they had the ability to force you to come to PBA. And I don't think any of you have been forced to come here. And if you have, let me know. I'll call the police. That's kidnapping, right? You're here of your own free will. Now, maybe you were not very careful when you read the requirements of graduating from PBA, but it is public knowledge that you will have to take certain required courses, including the Freedom in American Society course. Organizations in our society, such as PBA, Bank of America, employers that you will work for, are entitled to make rules for the internal governance of their own organization. And one of PBA's rules is the Freedom class requirement. And so in agreeing voluntarily to come to PBA, you implicitly agreed to observe the rules that they insist upon of all participants in our community. So you did actually agree to take this class, and therefore PBA is not forcing you to take it. So we're relieved of that burden. But as I said, that's one example. Let me give you another example. Let's see. A mother says to her little 6-year-old daughter, I want you to clean your room. That's what the mother wants. She wants to get her daughter to do something that she wants her to do, which is clean her room. So she has two means at her disposal. She can first use the method of freedom. She can try to persuade her daughter to clean her room. And so she talks to her daughter for weeks and she tells her, look, I know you don't believe me, but if you clean your room, you're going to feel happier, calmer, more at peace. You don't know it now, but trust me now, go ahead and clean the room and you'll see what I mean. Or she tries various methods, attempts at persuading her daughter to clean the room. But the daughter has free will, and at the end of the day, after all of mother's efforts, the daughter says, no, Mom, I'm okay with it. I'm fine. I'm not going to clean it. Unless the mother is willing to accept that as an answer, she only has one other option to get her daughter to do what she wants her to do, and that is to use the less noble means of coercion. So she wants her to clean the room, so she says, okay, you're not going to clean your room? Then you're not going to get your allowance. All right, what has mother done? By her statement, she has now narrowed her daughter's options to two undesirable choices from the point of view of the daughter. If you don't clean your room, you're not going to get your allowance. So what's the daughter's choices now? Clean the room against her will, she doesn't want to, or not get an allowance, which she also doesn't want. She doesn't want either of those options, but she has no other choices given her mother's statement. And the mother is doing it on purpose because she is trying to put pressure on her daughter to do what the mother wants, clean the room, rather than what the daughter wants, which is keep the dirty room and still get her allowance. That's not an option anymore. Mother has deliberately used the neutral strategy of coercion. In this case, people can argue over whether it's a good thing or not. Some people would think maybe it's not. Others would say, yes, it is a good thing to train up your children in good habits and so forth. So that's open to debate. But the point is that coercion in itself is neither good or bad. It's a neutral tool that people resort to when persuasion is not going to be effective. And that's why it's so common in life. It's everywhere. Watch yourself as you walk around the world the next couple of days. You will see that people are constantly putting pressure on us to do what they want us to do, rather than what we want to do. And as I said, maybe you yourself use the means of coercive pressure against others in the same thing. The reason it's so common is because persuasion is so difficult. We are stubborn and we're willful. And people, your teachers, your parents, your friends, everybody is constantly can talk to you until endlessly, but at the end of the day, if you're relying on persuasion, quite often you're not going to get the other person to respond the way that you want to. And so since most people are neither angels nor saints, they fall back on the less noble means of coercion. So the free society, as I said, is never going to be a society of perfect freedom. There is no perfection in this world, we certainly understand as Christians. But it is possible to be a reality. We know that for a fact, because for one thing, America has experienced freedom. Haltingly and never perfect, but for several centuries. So we know it is possible to establish the conditions that allow for the exercise of individual freedom. And that is, in other words, we know how to create the conditions that allow for people, most people, not all, but as many as humanly possible, to walk around this world pursuing their own values, goals, and purposes, and not being forced to submit to the purposes and will of other people. And so we'll close this introduction for now. And the next session is going to explain how we achieve a free society. What is necessary to prevent the rampant and arbitrary use of coercion so that no one can walk around the world except in fear of someone trying to force them to do things against their will. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We know how to do this. Our political and legal and moral order is the result of centuries and centuries and centuries of development, and we know how to preserve and protect individual freedom. So that'll be the topic of our next class when we talk about freedom and the law. All right, see you then.